So, welcome to our class on becoming a practical mystic. And this is a class that we're going to, an adventure in looking at Christian mystics and mystics through time and mystics and other spiritual practices, as well as examining things that mystics can teach us about having deepening our spiritual journey and how using those techniques that mystics have for the ages shared with us how they through us became part of our healing and the healing of the world. So I'm Reverend Barbara Williams, and I am joined by our director of music, Janine, and we are part of the family of Unity of Chautauqua. Just a little note, when do we meet? If you're interested and you go to our website, you can get an email about that. Our website is unitychq.org, and we meet the first Wednesday evening on Zoom, but we're also recording on YouTube and we're posting it on our Facebook page. So we hope you will join us and we hope you'll like us there. So let's just take a few moments. And one of the things, whenever I'm teaching a class, I like to take a few moments in the silence to begin us, because this is a night time that we're recording this, and many of us have had a busy day. So it's a great time in which to center ourselves and be really present with what we're going to share this evening. So Janine is going to begin with a few minutes, going to play her Native American flute and lead us into some silence.
Just take a moment to close your eyes and center yourself for a few moments of silence.
So just notice as the busyness of your day maybe just falls off your shoulders and your breath deepens. You've said yes to this time together to go deeper into experiencing the holy. And this evening, we're doing it by contemplating nature's glories. So I'd like to read a verse from Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah in the Hebrew Bible. For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and hills before you shall burst into song, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And so we just maybe take a moment and think about that verse. The prophet was connecting at a deep level to the oneness of nature. And so we just perhaps think of a time where that's been part of our experience. If someone said to you and said off the top of your head, if right now you could click your fingers and you could be in a place that would bring total peace and joy, is there a place in nature that calls you? And so we just say thank you for this evening together to explore that deeper. And so it is. So a deep breath and mystics through time, the most popular mystic experiences for people have been those associated with nature. And it kind of just so pleased that this was the week we were doing that, because a couple weeks ago I was in the North Carolina mountains, and sometimes the leaves haven't changed when we're there. We have the same week every year that we go back. But this year, the leaves were brilliant. And the air was cool, which me coming from Florida was such a treat. And my husband kept saying that I was going, oh, as whether we were hiking to a waterfall or just driving. And I also find that every time I leave the mountains, I start getting all teary-eyed. And so I thought about that, because since I knew I was going to share a little this evening about the glory, how we have an experience of the holy with the glories of nature, bring out that experience. And so I thought, well, okay, so what is that? And this is a head thing that idea I came up with, but there may be some truth to it. I thought, the autumn, what does that mean? And maybe it means for me some part of my spiritual journey. It's just like the spring, the idea of spring and nature is kind of like new ideas and new things popping up. And then the summer, enjoying those ideas, fleshing them out. And maybe the fall is the harvest time, and the leaves are kind of surrendering. It's the time where now we bring in the gifts of our spiritual journey. The spring came the ideas, the summer, the processing and the living of those ideas, and now we just harvest them. And then the winter again to go into that silence. So that's kind of a pattern that goes through many people's spiritual lives, including mine. And it's not associated physically with the seasons, but it's a pattern that is repetitive. So there's when I go up into North Carolina, there's a church that I would visit for years, and the minister has passed on, but there was a song, and I always would play it when I played it again this year, and as I went into the mountains, and my husband says, "Oh, there you go again with this song." I have to play it in the car as we're driving, but I wanted to say a few words or share a few words from the song because it just touches my heart and reminds me as this is being recorded on November 1st. So it's just kind of that harvest time when the harvest is coming home. And the song is called Bring the Harvest Home to Your Heart. And you won't find it online. It was just relevant to this one church and their musician. But these are the words that somehow make me again teary eyed along with the leaves. Blow away the heat of summer's wanton play. Gather in the fruits of all our growing. Listen to the rhythm of the earth, and she will say, Bring the harvest home. Bring the harvest home to your heart. So for me, that's represents what nature does for me. And you might want to notice that. I take it so for granted. And yet, if I go back and look through my life, there are times, almost so many of the very special times when I felt so connected to everything have to do with nature. Well, I want to share from the book a most surprising song, and it's the one that we're using. And if you're on our email list, you'll get information about that book. This is an experience by an English woman about that experience of nature that changed her life. And her name was Wendy, and she's a medical journalist. She was a psychotherapist, an avid gardener, but not religious. In fact, she considered herself a radical humanist. And so an author writes about her in a book called The Relevance of Bliss. And she says this: one autumn day, while tending her garden, she felt unusually relaxed and contemplative and became very aware of the beauty around her, the birds, the breeze coming softly through the leaves and touching her face, the scent of grass and flowers. She followed a sudden impulse to lay face down on the grass and felt energy flow through her from the earth. So right there, I stop at that feeling, energy flowing through. I mean, don't we walk through the earth so quickly? And how many of us have ever taken that time to know that everything is energized in a way and we could become sensitive to it? And that's what she did this day. And now these are her words describing it. The boundary between my physical self and my surroundings seemed to dissolve, and my feeling of separation vanished. And we talked about that the last one we recorded last month, about that idea that time and space start to vanish in those experiences where we get connected to that oneness. In a strange way, I felt blended into a total unity with the earth, as if I were made of it and it of me. I was aware of the blades of grass between my fingers and touching my face. And I was overwhelmed by a force which seemed to penetrate every fiber of my being. I felt as if I'd suddenly come alive for the first time, as if I were awakening from a long, deep sleep into the real world. I love that part. That just reminding us that so much of our lives are on automatic pilot or living under the dictates of what cultures that we miss, that we've been asleep in some ways. I know things that wake me up are like babies or puppies, but also like the energy, the very energy of the earth. And so she goes on to say, I remember feeling that a veil had been lifted from my eyes and everything came into focus. Although my head was still on the grass, whatever else I believed, I realized I was surrounded by an incredible loving energy, and that everything, both living and non living, is bound with a kind of consciousness which I cannot describe in words. Although the experience could not have lasted more than a few minutes, it seemed endless, as if I were in some kind of suspended, eternal state of understanding. Then it passed, and I remained still and quiet on the lawn, trying to absorb what happened and not quite believing it was real. A profound feeling of joy and peace is what I recalled afterwards from those extraordinary moments. And Wendy goes on to say that she could tap into that later as life, as it invariably does, brings her challenges. And she felt at times things were falling apart, and she could come back to that moment, to that time that she had set aside to connect with that energy. And for me, those moments are not frequent, and yet I've done that same thing as Wendy, came back to them at times when they needed them, and felt that joy again, that connection with everything, and remembering the moments I've had that peace, that there is this loving energy that we're in the midst of chaos. I to remember to tap into, there would be a shift in my life. And indeed, that's what she reports, that it shifted her life from that point forward. So I was thinking that children, as a child, I bet all of you can remember those times when, those carefree times when we played and we were so present in the moment. It's as if that when you're in awe or wonder, time expands, doesn't it? And it seems so easy as a child. We have to work a lot harder as we're adults. But I think if we took more time and decided in our lives to cover less ground, that we would start remembering. And I think we might discover, which I've done this, is when I've done that sort of thing, when I've spent the time um, nourishing myself, slowing down, not having so much stimulus coming at me in different areas, then when something comes that I need to attend to, surprising things show up, that a divine order, as we call it in unity, that bless and make that thing that I need to overcome and find a solution. I find, instead of pushing against or avoiding, that I find a third way that indeed incorporates that connection. So what I have to do is decide for me that it's not how much I get done, that's my goal, but how much I'm connected. And then the getting done takes care of itself. And what a joy when I remember that. Now, I don't remember that very often, and I find myself repeating and remembering. But for me, just sometimes going outside and walking, or slowing down and noticing, from birds to wind on my cheeks to all the beauty, uh, just helps me realize that I've been going in circles. So the poet Wordsworth describes the conditioning which kicks us out of this awakening in heaven, and awakening in that conscious of the holy. And he says this in a poem: our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, have had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. So I want to stop there with the poem just for a minute and think about what he just is saying there. I, I'm knowing or expecting, maybe guessing, that Wordsworth is having a one of those mystical experiences where he understands that as human beings we're eternal, and that he senses that we've come this way before. And as he said, that we've come, but in a way we've forgotten, and yet we're trailing. I love that, that um, we're trailing in clouds of glory, and we've come from God again. And so we're born into this with this connection, this oneness. And then he goes on to say, heaven lies about us in our infancy. Yet shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light, and whence it flows, he sees it in his joy. The youth who daily further from the east must travel, still in nature's priest. And I'll stop there again. That he says that slowly closing in culture, all the things that tell us to move from our heart, from the experience of connection into our head and survival and rules and things like that, there's still, we have nature's priest with us, even though we've traveled far from the east. And I was thinking about east and thinking, what could that mean? And my thoughts was, why the sun rises in the east. So the idea of rising in culture, in consciousness, might be what he meant there, and that we start traveling away from that rising up of who we are. And by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At last the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day. What I like about aging is we get to rediscover that. It's just, I have more opportunity to embrace that awe and wonder, and to slow down. There's a philosopher, a French philosopher named Albert Camus, and he said this about it. And he says this one quote that I love: in the middle of winter, I discover that there was in me an invincible summer. In the middle of winter. And so part of our growing and aging, we get to experience some really interesting winters. And to me, the holy, and we're using this time the mysticism of the glories of nature, is one of those. Now, you might have a different path. For me, that's a strong one, the glories of nature, that we can find that invincible summer again. That even through those challenging winters, I like that, just to think that I have inside of me an invincible summer. Now I'm adding a book to, I listed in our emails some books, and I'm adding one to it. When I was doing this about nature's glory, it came to me that there was a writing in a book, one of my favorite books. And the writing's called Child of Wonder, since we're talking about how in childhood we heaven lied, as the poet said, heaven lies about us in our infancy. And so it's from a book called Seasons of Your Heart. and it's by Macrina, and I'll put this in our the email out. Um, her last name, and I don't know that I'm pronouncing it right, is Wider Kerr. And she begins by talking about Moses, of all things. And she talks about Moses being at the burning bush. And here's the quote from the scriptures in Exodus, the 3rd chapter. Um, he sees in the burning bush that it's not being consumed, and God says, Moses, Moses. And Moses answered, here I am. And God says, come no nearer. Take off your shoes, for the place you stand is holy ground. So our lives are kind of a trip back to the holy. We were born with it. We somewhat lose it on the way, and our trip is back to become the child of wonder. And that child of wonder, if we think about it, it not only brings joy into our lives, but it just like it's like putting a stone, like a stone of joy, and you just drop it into a lake and see it spread, the little waves spreading out. So we're not just doing this for ourselves, becoming children of wonder, um, but in remembering, and that's part of the nature's glories, the holy, and in celebrating the nature's glories, is that we're back, like our path becomes one of wonder. Charles Fillmore said about taking off our shoes, he's our co-founder in Unity. He said that taking off your shoes in that scripture represents taking anything out of its influence that is keeping you from knowing that you're one. And so in this book, The Child of Wonder, she's saying, Macrina says, you must take off your shoes often. Taking off your shoes is a sacred ritual. It's a hallowed moment of remembering the goodness of space and time. It is a way of celebrating the holy ground on which you stand. If you want to be a child of wonder, cherish the truth that time and space are holy. Whether you take off your shoes symbolically or literally matters little. What is important is that you are alive to the holy ground on which you stand, to the holy ground of which you are. And this is her poem. And I've probably read this 100 times. It keeps calling me back. So it must have a lot of meaning for me. My bare feet walk the earth reverently, for everything keeps crying, take off your shoes. The ground you stand on is holy. The ground of your being is holy. When the wind sings through the pines like the breath of God, awakening you to the sacred present, calling your soul to new insights, take off your shoes. When the sun rises above your rooftop, coloring the world with dawn, be receptive to this awesome beauty. Put on your garment of adoration and take off your shoes. When the red maple drops its last leaf of summer, wearing its burning bush robes no longer, read between its barren branches and take off your shoes. When sorrow presses close to your heart, begging you to put your trust in God alone, filling you with a quiet knowing that God's hand is not too short to heal you. Take off your shoes. When a new person comes into your life like a mystery about to unfold, and you find yourself marveling over the frailty and splendor of every human being. Take off your shoes. Take off your shoes of distraction. Take off your shoes of ignorance and blindness. Take off your shoes of hurry and worry. Take off anything that prevents you from being a child of wonder. Take off your shoes. The ground you stand on is holy. The ground you are is holy. You probably can see why I come back to that book over and over. And when I get distracted by the news, is one of the things that I can easily get distracted by, especially things that I don't have control over. And that can just sap my energy. And I forget that there are places that I can be holy and that I can be part of the healing. But as soon as I concentrate on the things that I'm not part of, that I don't have control over, not that I don't want to know about them, but when I just anguish about them and I forget to be a child of wonder, because as we're doing whatever healing work is ours to do with our family, our friends, our community, our country, when we stop worrying, instead decide to be in awe and wonder at this process of healing, it becomes a joy rather than a chore based on our anxiety and fear. I was at the Unity conference online, and as part of keeping my certification as a Unity minister. And so I went to the Eastern region this year, and a woman was on there, a profound woman. I'd signed up for her emails, and she was at Chautauqua actually teaching a class. I just didn't have time to take it, but she's spent a lot of time in Unity and around. She's not a minister. Her name's Jan Phillips. And if you Google her, you can find things about her. But she, to me, summed this whole thing up with this poem she sent me about when I signed up. I got it about a week ago. And I was like, whoa, isn't that amazing? I put an intent out about understanding and deepening my understanding of the holiness of nature's glories. And here comes, so I'm going to leave you with this poem. And then Janine's going to leave us with a profound song about this very thing. And so this is from Jan about what it means to reconnect with the awe and wonder of life. I come from the waters. I come from the earth. I am life on its passage from death to rebirth. I'm a leaf in October, the sap in the spring. I am bone, I am fur, I am feather and wing. My thoughts hail from stars, my words become flesh. The spirit and body perfectly meshed. I'm a chalice of wonder. It has quenched my desire. I am no longer seeking. I'm a hearth to its fire. So deep breath as Janine sings for us. Every step is holy.
This is a song new to me by Drucker. And her song is very long, so we're going to shorten it. Every step is holy. Every breath is life, every moment precious, when held up to the light. Every heart connected, each the face of God. Grace has shown me every step is holy. Every step is holy. Every breath is life. Every moment precious, when held up to the light. Every heart connected, each the face of God. Grace has shown me every step is holy. Holy, holy. Everyone, every breath, every step is holy. Holy, holy, holy. Every step is holy. Every breath is life. Every moment precious, when held up to the light. Every heart connected, each the face of God. Grace has shown me every step is holy.
Oh, Janine, crying again. Thank you for selecting that song. And so now, as we finish, just the invitation is to consider how you will make your steps holy. What little things will you do to remember that you're a child of wonder, that awe is within our natures, that we are holy? And so, thank you for being part of this experience. And we look forward to seeing you the first Wednesday again in December.